requirements. With the recent changes in guidelines, it's now essential for agents to log the affirmation of consent received from the consumer or their designated representative. And below are the stipulations that are required for the consent. Action of the documentation. So the consumer authorized representative must take an action that generates the necessary consent documentation. So what is that? They're going to see you and wanting to sign up for insurance. So before you go over and gather items from them, you need to get their consent. The minimum information of the documentation is a description. So a paragraph, a clear explanation of the scope, purpose, and duration of the given consent, the date of the consent, their information, their name, who are they giving the consent to? So that would be your name. And then how would they retract that consent? And this consent form is required to keep on file for a minimum of 10 years by the agent. Review documentation requirements. So another item needed. The updated regulation also introduced a documentation requirement for reviewing and confirming the accuracy of eligibility application. Information by consumers or their authorized representative. This does not mean when you go over the eligibility results, you have to get their consent. This just means that you're verifying and reviewing the accuracy of their information in order to input it into the application to get the eligibility. Below, I'm going to go over the required documents for that. So everything here is pretty similar to the other consent. So their name, a clear explanation of the attestations made at the end of the eligibility application, so application, and then agent name, the person assisting them, and again, 10 years. So this consent can be combined with the other consent. Standard consent form, I'm going to go over that. So let's take a look at the standard consent form. And all of this information that I gathered is from the CMS training and also from the RegTap trainings that CMS does hold. Those trainings are available for any agents to attend. REGTAP is the website, RegTap, and on there they have a bunch of trainings that agents can go to and can access. So the general consent form, this will be I, the client's name, the primary person, give permission to who. So this will be your name. And then this goes over all of the information that is required of the consent. So this first part here, clear description of the scope, purpose, and duration of the consent. Okay, let me go back to that form. So that's all right here in the body of the consent. So they're giving consent for searching the marketplace application, completing an application for eligibility and enrollment, providing ongoing account maintenance, and responding to inquiries from the marketplace regarding their application. By consenting to this agreement, they're authorizing the agent, which your name would go here, to view and use confidential information provided to the client in writing, electronically, or by phone. So you can review their letters that they come in, those letters that they receive from the marketplace. You can review everything. I understand the agent will not use or share my personal information. So this part here is in reference to PII. I confirm the information I provided for entry on my marketplace eligibility and enrollment application will be true to the best of my knowledge, and confirming they've reviewed the completed application and all information is accurate. So if you're using an intake form or if you're writing it down somewhere or going through, you can have them review it before you submit the information or input the intake form. So all of this is combined. Those two consents are combined here. In this primary writing agent section, this is where you will fill in your information. Agency. Right here, you do not need to fill in Benevinvest information. Why? Because you're going to be the agent on the application. You're going to be inputting your MPN number. You will not be inputting Benevinvest MPN number or information inside of the application anywhere. It's your client. You're going to be using your MPN number. So you only need to fill out this top information. Okay. Some instances this may be involved, but we'll get to you individually. It's slim. And then this is where the client's going to input their information. So the primary person, the first person in the application, they will go there. If they have a authorized representative, which maybe that's 5% of your clients, their phone number, email, the primary person's phone number and email, and then their signature and the date. Okay, that will all be here in this one form. So we made this form fillable. So they need to just input their name and then they'll fill in the bottom sections with the fillable version. Signatures cannot be inputted. It's just a text box so they can type in their name. But I have other options that I'm going to go over shortly. Okay, so that includes the date the consent was given, the name of the consumer, the agent name, a description of the scope, and the process by which they can rescind the consent. And that is listed right here at the top. I understand that my consent remains in effect until I revoke it, and I may revoke or modify my consent at any time by contacting my agent. So it's kept general that they just need to reach out to you. Consent form process. So before gathering all intake information from the client, you want to start the consent form. You want to get it filled out, just signed by them. Advise the client that it's a requirement from CMS and it's also for their protection. They might be wondering, why is it for my protection? You can let them know that CMS is putting this in place because there may have been a lot of consumer fraud. So they want to make sure that the agent helping the client has the consent from the client. Okay. Options. You can do a paper form, an online form signed electronically with a timestamp, and usually there's different systems that have that timestamp, or phone recording. So you'll go over the details of the consent and then you'll ask the client if they agree. If they give their consent, state your full name, today's date, and the last four of your social. And that will work if we need to send in that call recording to one of the carriers. So a lot of carriers have been emailing. They always will email us. They'll email you. If a client is disagreeing or saying they never got in touch with someone, this person changed my application or whatnot, I don't know who this agent is, the carriers have been emailing. So this, if you have a phone recording, the online form or the paper form, that can be sent to the carrier. And then the carrier knows, okay, you did speak to this agent. There's no foul play. Okay, different online form systems include SignNow, DocuSign, PandaDoc, Foxit Sign, Signwell, and Adobe. Those are from my research of what would be easier, more cost-effective, different systems to use. So I put a few different options there because maybe you might be familiar with one, you might already have one. There's other ones available. I just found that these ones were more user-friendly and easier. Remember, you do need to save the documents for 10 years. So if you have the documents filed in one of these systems and you cancel the system or you stop paying for it, remember you need to get those documents and you need to save them. You can save them in an encrypted folder. You can save them in a USB drive that you have locked up. But you need to save those files for 10 years, those consent forms. Notes. So new consent is not needed each time you talk with the client. So you can use that initial consent form that you filled out with your client. So this open enrollment season, this is when you're going to be getting all of your consent forms for the clients that you already have, and then consents from new clients. So now if you haven't started texting the clients to consent to get signed, you can have them start signing it now. And then come open enrollment, that piece of the puzzle is already taken care of. You already have their consent. So now you can go over their information, quote, and give them their new plan. Okay, so if you haven't started getting the consent, now is a good time. There's no limit to when you can get the consent. Okay, CMS does not specify an automatic expiration date for the consent because it could become burdensome for anyone consistently seeking services from the same agent to renew that. So those consents last until the client takes it away. Remember again, they need to be secured and retained for 10 years. Agent of record or broker of record forms, those can be used instead of a consent form. But remember, you might not know what carrier the client is signing up with. So that's why you need to get the standard consent form filled out. If you know the client is signing up for, let's say, Cigna, okay, you can have them sign the Cigna agent of record or broker of record form. Some carriers do not have that form. They get the file from the marketplace and that is what they go by. So use the forms wisely. We'll be sending them all out to all of the agents. If you're a Benevest agent with 3 or more ACA carriers with Benevest, not under downline agency, but with Benevest, we will be personalizing the fillable form for you and sending it your way. Okay. Again, new consent is not needed each time you talk to the client. Okay. Agents, brokers, and web brokers providing assistance verbally, such as over the phone, may obtain consent by engaging in a conversation from the consumer or their authorized representative that at a minimum contains the required elements of the consent. And those we went over: date, their name. We're going to add the last 4 of their social or their date of birth. They're going to repeat that or say it for you over the phone recording. And then the date, their name, the last 4 of their social or their date of birth. And then they could also say their email or their phone number, but they're providing that to you on the call already. So it's a little bit redundant. And then you're going to state your name and then they're giving you the authorization. This conversation should be documented in some fashion, such as through a voice recording software. Remember, if you're having the phone call recorded, you need to let the client know that the call is being recorded. An email summary, text message, or other method, and maintained by you. Okay, so you will be in charge of maintaining your own consent forms from the client. That is the agent's duty. Client consent for marketplace enrollment. So this is separate. So we want to make sure that before we go into anyone's application, we have their consent to go into their marketplace application. If you have their consent, this will avoid a lot of issues and a lot of the fraud or client inquiries that we have been receiving from the carrier stating they don't know who this person is. So according to the FFM guidelines, agents must secure consent from individuals, employers, or employees before. You search consumer applications through the enrollment platform, assisting in marketplace applications and going over the tax credit, enrolling them inside of the marketplace, and then checking and updating their coverage status. So looking at their eligibility and whatnot. So you need consent for all of those. That is grouped into the standard consent form, but you don't need a separate form for each. If you do have an enrollment platform, you're not supposed to look up multiple enrollments at the same time. So if you access a marketplace through an enrollment platform and you look someone up, their first name, last name, date of birth, and their state, you need to get out of there before looking up the next person. That's another rule from CMS. Agents can only access and update consumer information with their explicit permission of the individual they're assisting. So you cannot talk to someone on the telephone, go into their app and update the MPN on there to yours unless you have full consent from the client and go over everything with them. These also apply to state-based exchanges. While the Centers for CMS doesn't dictate a specific consent format, you do have the flexibility to decide. So again, verbally, electronically, or in person on a paper is what's best. Either one that works for you. And again, we have the general consent form. Any agent changes or business transfers, those require a new consent. So let's say I'm going to cover my butt. If I sign up a client with Ambetter and I have their consent and we go over everything, that's with Ambetter. If they want to switch to a different carrier, even though it doesn't expire, I'm going to be as detailed and I'm just going to write the new carrier on there and get another consent. Or I could have the same consent and I could have them just re-sign because I don't want to take any chances. We don't know what they're going to come up with next. I have a question. Can you text the consent of form to the client and simply ask if they consent? This way the agent would not need to read the entire form while talking to them on the phone. You can ask them to reply to it with their same information, the name, date of birth, phone number, email, and the date. That should work. But how do you file the text message? That would just be my concern. Even though it says you can do it by text, in the CMS training, that would just be my concern. But I would text them an electronic link that they can fill out while you have them on the phone, so you don't have to read the full thing. But again, I'm planning in advance and I'm getting that off to at least my book of business that I have now. We will be sending everyone that's a Benevest appointed agent with 3 or more carriers a link to your own form. But you do want to create your own shareable link. That way it will be filed where you need it to be filed because you'll be in charge of keeping those consents. Okay, and that is the finish of this presentation training today. It was quite short, although there is a lot of new things that are coming about. It's not that much new stuff. So basically you need the enrollment consent form filled out by your client. You'll keep it on file for 10 years. If the client comes back to see you, you do not need to get a new one filled out. It only expires when the client revokes that consent. If we're providing simple quotes, we do not need it. So if you're just getting basic information, so to quote someone, you need their zip code, age, income, household size. If you're getting that, you do not need to get the consent because sometimes they're not going to qualify. So let's say I'm talking to someone, hey, Mr. Smith, let's go ahead and let's see if you're qualified to get the tax subsidy, the insurance. What's your income? My income is $5,000. Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. Unfortunately, you don't qualify for a tax credit, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't get a consent for that situation because I knew his income was lower. But once you start getting over and needing to gather more information after they like the quote and whatnot, then you would want to get the consent. Good question. Our phone system that we use, RingCentral, it is recorded and the caller hears this call is being recorded on their end. This form, we have it fillable right now. Let me download the fillable one. So if a client fills it out, they're going to put their name on here. They could type on this form. That's what I mean by fillable. So if you're a Benevest appointed agent, we'll make you a form that's fillable. And then also we will fill in your information for you and send you a copy of your form in here. The signature part is not a signature. It's only a typing field. So if you use a system to send the forms to the client, then you're able to get that signature from them. Okay, let me go back so I can show up that screen. So if you use Sign Now, PandaDoc, SignWell, any of these, you can get that e-signature. So you can just send that to them by email, some of them by text, and then they have that. You're welcome. The first type of consent discussed, that was the general consent, that you need their consent to help them. The other consent is going through and making sure everything that you're going to be entering onto the application is correct to their knowledge. If we read the consent over RingCentral, is it recorded? Yes, it would. The whole call is recorded. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, it's a little tricky to make forms fillable, so whatever we can do on our end to help our agents out, we're more than happy to. RingCentral calls, if you're in the lead program, the calls are automatically saved in the software that we have. So you don't have to worry about saving those calls. Your personal ones, you would have to. If you don't have the fillable one yet, our team is working through because we had a previous CMS form and then we needed to make it more simplified and easier. So we created the new form, found the new form, and then it's fillable. So we'll be sending those out to agents between this week and next week. But we'll send you the fillable blank one, so at least you can have that. We'll be sending it via email. Duration of the consent, what max time frame to use? You won't use any max time frame. So this is general. There's no expiration to the consent. So where did I find that out? In the CMS training. Okay, so here it is about the expiration. That the verbiage there, this verbiage is directly from the 2024 CMS training, this whole section right here. This is direct from the training. You're welcome, everyone. Okay, second consent. Second consent, we need a form or verbal is good enough. Verbal is good enough, so you can combine the consents into the one. What I would do is I would take this and I would read it a few times and then I would be able to summarize it to the caller. You can download your own call recordings if you're using RingCentral, yes. It will work in every state. So this is a general one, and it will work in every state and state-based exchanges and the regular marketplace. Okay. Great questions, everyone. I know the training was a little bit inside of the CMS training was a little bit trying to figure out the gray areas and make them black and white. So I did take the time to do the RegTap trainings, and then this is what we came up with. Okay, and if you are getting if you're receiving consumer information from a third party, let's say you're buying leads from a lead vendor, things like that, you still would need to get the consent from the client. If you are in Benevest lead program, we are trying to work right now on setting up automations and workflows so the client will get that form and fill it out. We're currently testing that in the testing phase, but we will let you know. Okay, any other questions? And I'm just going to show you the consent form, the general one that CMS had provided. You can use that one too. And some of the information from the other one is from this one. This is a general one as well. This is the one that CMS had created. So we'll send everything out to everyone. The recordings are all, the webinars are all recorded, and you can find them in your Benevest All Access portal. You'll be able to find all of the full webinar recordings there, the Benevest webinars, along with the carrier webinars. And you can also find the upcoming training schedule inside of there. So can the clients sprint their name on the consent form and it's an acceptable? You have to print it out and sign it. No, they can fill it out electronically. If I had a client filling out a form electronically, this would be what I would use. And then if they filled it out electronically, that's easy. If it's through one of the signature systems like Adobe, right? But if they send it to you and then they're emailing it back to you, how would they get it back to you? By email? Probably that's time stamped and that's sent from their email, so that will cover you. If they take a picture and send it to you, they're sending it back to you by text, so you would have that as well. So even if they and if they have an iPhone, they can sign it in their iPhone too. That's a little bit tricky if they've never done that before and you don't want to sit on the phone going over tech support for 15 minutes. So maybe they can send you, you can just make a text version of this and then they can reply with the information that's needed. But me, I'm going to load it into a link and I would send it out to them that way and have them fill it out. And then if, let's say if I used Adobe, the completed ones would go into my Adobe, and then let's say I didn't want to renew it come February because I take the season off, for example, wishful thinking. But then if I didn't pay for the Adobe, I would download them all and I would store them and file them. That way, when I stop paying for Adobe, I wouldn't lose them. Thank you. Where is the All Access portal? So if you're appointed with 3 ACA carriers or more with Benevest, then you have access to All Access portal. If you want to type in your name, we can send you your login information, but the team has been sending everyone's portal information out over the last week, and then they're still finishing up. Why do you need 3 appointments to get the Benevest All Access portal? Some agents just come and they might have Anthem with us. We know that's not really sold, so we want to make sure that if anyone is a true Benevest agent, that they're getting the full benefits, not just people that have maybe one appointment with us and then they have a main agency with everything else. If we get an email back with a signed consent form, do we need to email Benevest consent form or is it the agent hold it for 10 years? You'll be holding it for 10 years, so those will be your files for your clients. Good question. We don't need a copy for our records. Now, if the carrier does send an email about a client that potential fraud or what have you, then we would ask you for a copy of it, but hopefully we will never get that from any of our agents. We've been getting some, but we do send warning emails out to the agents that you have to basically comply with your insurance license. You can't just go about doing whatever. You need to follow the rules. So good questions, everyone. Anyone else have any other questions?